Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast as we share the truth concerning these last days and what you must do to save yourself from the violent times that are just ahead. Today's podcast is a word of truth accounting of the end times. The end is coming. The end is near. Today's podcast is entitled End Times 539, The Impact of Ignorance and Deception, Part 9, How Delusion and Complacency Defeat the Spirit of Transformation Within Your Mind. The podcast objectives are: analyze the second act of self-reliance in your mind, analyze the impact of delusion within your mind, analyze the role of complacency in the progression of death, and analyze how delusion makes you someone you don't want to be. Welcome. Now, before we begin today's lesson, I would like to welcome all my beloved brothers and sisters in Yahushua Messiah who have been scattered to the four corners of the earth, who Yahuwah has joined to this ministry for such a time as this. I would also like to welcome anyone who is engaging our podcasts or videos for the first time. We trust you were led by the set apart spirit in finding us. And if you continue to be led, we hope you stay with us, for these are troubling times and an evil day is just ahead. To this end, if you are watching this video on YouTube and you have not subscribed to our channel, click the subscribe button below and you will be alerted whenever we post new videos. Also, if you have any questions at the conclusion of this video, you can ask them using the link in the podcast description below the video player. Last but not least, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up so YouTube can share it with believers like us. There is no saving you from you. Shalom, my beloved brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 514 of our exposition of lawlessness. In the most recent podcast, we analyzed the damage the spirit of denial does to your mind when he is teamed up with self-reliance. Now, it goes without saying that we are far beyond the point of no return in this progression of death. Ergo, the remainder of this progression serves only to strengthen the stranglehold the enemy has over your soul at this juncture. Along these lines, you should consider the landscape of your thought dimension at this juncture. You should start with the image to the right. And seeing as there is a lot going on, I will provide a larger diagram. And here is that larger diagram. Feel free to pause the video. Now, first things first, a lot has transpired from the progression of confusion to denial. Not only this, but the impact of self-reliance this time around is much worse than the first time around. This is because the spirit of denial is positioned at the heart of your thought generation process. This guarantees that every thought you think will be contrary to the truth, for every form of truth will be denied. Now, we discussed this matter on Monday when we introduced the concept of self-truth. As you can clearly see, self-truth is established as the Ruach of self controls your reality through the spirit of denial. This forces your entire thought dimension to be aligned with self-truth over time. And the entire procedure is driven by denial. And there is no one who can stop him. Not only this, but denial further corrupts your voice of reason. If you recall, your voice of reason was manipulated by error. In effect, the truth becomes unreasonable, for the spirit of error has taken his voice. This is why you won't have a second thought, for one is not needed. And to ensure that one is never formed, denial is now in the place your second thought used to be in. This will ensure that your first thought is your only thought, and more importantly, that it is a product of self-truth. It is a most scandalous and elaborate model of depraved checks and balances. Now, as bad as this scenario is, the worst part is that it is fixed. We know this because the sum of all this damage results in a thought dimension that is governed by the spirit of self-reliance. And this is the apex of self-rule. We know this because every aspect of your thought dimension has been corrupted, save two, and they are powerless to the government the Ruach of self has established. As I say, self-rule at this juncture is inevitable. Ergo, there is no opportunity for the man or woman with this mind to ever believe in the truth. My dear friends, even if there were some way the truth could penetrate the fortress created by ignorance and deception, you must remember that the spirits of disregard and despair have created a hyper emotional environment within your mind. Ergo, the presence of truth will set off a chain reaction of your most violent emotions. This is why you will often find many people becoming emotionally violent and unstable when they are confronted with the truth. The same goes for those who are not as belligerent as others in their resistance to truth. What it comes down to is this: whether your resistance is cantankerous or silent, the emotions being deployed will always be violent. For this is the nature of the Ruach of self. Now, I said all of that because I wanted you to understand how the second act of self-reliance is much greater than the first. My dear friends, your mind is in a terrible place and it can hardly get worse. Notwithstanding, there are two final obstructions to perpetual self-rule. And yet, at this juncture, there is nothing they can do. Listen to me. Nothing can stop the second act of self-reliance, for there is no saving you from you. Nevertheless, knowledge is power, and Yahuwah wants you to see the full progression of death. And so we must analyze the final stretch of where this path leads, such that we are mindful to watch our steps. Let's get started. To ensure your mind is fixed in darkness. Now, it goes without saying that the progression of death evolves from denial to delusion, as you can see by the table below. Along these lines, delusion is the final phase in the progression of death. Ergo, once you fall into delusion, you will find yourself in full opposition to Elohim and his kingdom. This is because delusion represents the most extreme position outside of Yahuwah's will. It is as far as you can go. Now, this speaks to the great danger of delusion. Vis-a-vis, delusion compromises the integrity of your thought dimension beyond recovery, which allows him to push you to a spiritual plane where even the most high Elohim can't reach you, and thus he won't save you. The reason why is sure. It's because you are denying him at every turn, which is evidence that you are walking in darkness. Here lies the problem, which I will capture with the following interest point. Spiritual darkness is designed to blind you to the truth. However, it is also designed to open your eyes to false beliefs, which you will accept as truth, for it is the only thing you are able to see. Now, we can see this matter clearly by reconsidering a definition of delusion. Once more, please. By definition, delusion is a fixed false belief that is resistant to reality, reason, truth, and facts. Something a person believes and wants to be true when it is, in fact, not true. Now, here lies the inflection and the great danger of delusion. Vis-a-vis, the spirit of delusion reinforces self-truth by distorting your reality, such that it is always aligned with your personal preferential beliefs. This is crucial for the same way the children of light are persistently confronted with darkness that we must resist. The children of darkness are persistently confronted with light, which they resist. And the primary source of their resistance is delusion. Along these lines, the spirit of delusion is like a conversion portal surrounding your mind. In effect, knowledge that penetrates your mind is distorted and converted into a lie before it ever enters your mind. And after all of that, it is still rejected. It is still denied. Now, that said, the question we should chiefly entertain is this: why does the spirit of delusion invest time and effort converting the truth into a lie if the Ruach of self is predisposed to reject the lie? The answer is sure. It is to ensure that your mind is fixed in darkness and it never sees the light. Here again, this is in line with the definition of delusion, which is a fixed false belief that is resistant to reality, reason, truth, and fact. And this conversion portal is an illustration of his resistance to reality, reason, truth, and fact. Standing on the edge of endless death. Now, although many who fall into a state of delusion never saw it coming, the truth is, this was the plan all along. To wit, the enemy knows that there is only one set of beliefs he can deceive you into elevating above the knowledge of Elohim. That is, the beliefs you want to be true. Ergo, the entire progression of ignorance and deception is designed to create a mental environment where you lose the ability to distinguish what is true from what you want to be true, to the point where the latter becomes the former and the former remains true. And if you consider the progression of death carefully, you will see that every step brings you closer to the adoption of self-truth. And although it is true that you were deceived, the truth is, this is what you always wanted. My dear friend, this is what you always believed. And the truth is, it is all ending the same way it began, with the spirit of complacency. Now, along these lines, the progression of ignorance and deception began with complacency. To wit, complacency, after losing his war with transformation, did not sit idly by. Quite the contrary, he was plotting, he was planning. And per precedence, he sought out 7 evil Ruachov, stronger than he is. And he came to be in league with 7 of the 16 deadliest degrees of lawlessness. And the first of these was disregard. Now, at that juncture, complacency teamed up with disregard to reinstate the stronghold of despair. And although complacency had not established any strongholds at that time, the wars he waged allowed all the former strongholds within your mind to be reestablished. In effect, every stronghold of disobedience and doubt that was in your mind afore has been reared up again. But this time, each stronghold is supported by a degree of ignorance and deception, making it 7 points stronger than before. Now, this brings us to the stronghold of complacency, the final stronghold that must be created to ensure you never succeed the delusion you are under. And because you are so far beyond the point of no return, this will be the easiest stronghold the enemy creates in your mind. Not only this, but it is also the reason why you will never escape the progression of death. It is because there is no escape. The path does not exist. And even if the path did exist, you would never follow it because you are infected with complacency. My dear friends, you are standing on the edge of endless death, and the enemy has your mind so locked up that there is nothing you can do about it. As I say, this is the wide gate and the broad way that leads to destruction, and there are many who enter in through it. Someone you don't want to be. Now, it goes without saying that the man who enters the wide gate and the broad way does so because A, he has no conscience, and B, he has lost his senses. And if you recall, your conscience and your senses are the last men standing in your mind. You can see this by observing the image to the right. Vis-a-vis, your conscience and your senses are the only 2 facets within your thought dimension that are not enclosed with a red border, signifying that they are still alive. And yet, they won't be alive for long. If you recall, we analyzed this matter in End Times 368, How Disobedience Plagues the Mind, Part 5, which was posted on November 8th, 2024. In that podcast, we analyzed the fate of your senses and your conscience. And as it so happens, the same fate befalls them in this war, for the damage done prior to the conclusion is worse than the first. Ergo, there is no need for ignorance and deception to take novel measures in maintaining the stronghold of complacency. And again, if you recall, this is the purpose of the progression of doubt and disobedience. For, as you know, anyone who is infected with complacency will be infected with every degree of lawlessness. Ergo, they will be powerless to stop the progression and powerless to guard their minds. Now, the primary reason why you are powerless in this scenario is because complacency is the counter objective of transformation. Ergo, the moment complacency came onto the scene, you stopped being transformed. Here lies the problem. To wit, transformation empowers us to walk in the path of righteousness, whereby we are saved. And yet, because this war was initiated by complacency, the transformation process has been obstructed from the start, which allowed the enemy to pull you out of the way. Now, here again, it is true that he used deception, but every deception was aligned with a matter you wanted to believe. Else, you would have resisted the enemy at the first sign of trouble, and you would have never entered the phase of the questioning. But you did enter the phase of the questioning. Ergo, complacency didn't force you into the progression of ignorance and deception. Quite the contrary, complacency only worked to expose those matters that you were willing to ignore. And this is why you were deceived. Now, here is the last thing I will say on this matter. And this is the most important takeaway. Delusion, as we have stated, is a conversion portal and the force that empowers complacency to obstruct and eventually suspend the transformation process. However, this does not mean that you are no longer being transformed. Quite the contrary, for we are all being transformed in one way or another. To wit, those who are in the way of holiness are being transformed into the spiritual standard of Yahushua Messiah. And those who operate in lawlessness are being transformed into spiritual tares, i.e., offspring of the wicked one. Now, this is where delusion comes onto the scene, vis-a-vis delusion as a conversion portal creates a more deliberate and structured transformation process that converts men and women into the worst version of themselves. To wit, men and women that Yahuwah will never recover. My dear friends, hear me carefully as I say, this is huge. Let me tell you something. We are dealing with next level spiritual warfare. And in case you didn't get it, I will offer it to you now as a revelation. Get this. Prior to the completion of the progression of ignorance and deception, everyone who pursues lawlessness retains some measure of resistance. Ergo, they are not completely carried away by lawlessness. In effect, they are still in play. They are losing hope, but they are still in play. However, once the progression of death has ended and the stronghold of complacency has been forged, you will have no resistance. This allows delusion to transform you into a monster as you become your worst version of you. My dear friends, I truly hope you are seeing this. I pray that the Most High Elohim is opening your eyes to the truth of these matters. As I say, delusion is a terrible ill. He has the power to make you someone you don't want to be. And yet, you will never know it's happening when it's happening, for you have completed the progression of death, and now you cannot see. This is the impact of delusion and complacency and the great damage of ignorance and deception. The war is lost, the damage has been done, and all who descend to this spiritual plane will never recover. Selah. Now, here is the final word. A preacher came to me to tell about the weary, oh, how they fell. Brothers and sisters, hear me carefully as I say, there are many reasons why everyone who is not wearing the girdle of truth is heading towards this dismal fate. And yet, the greatest of these is sure they will not endure sound doctrine. My dear friends, the Ruach warned us that this time would come. And now that it is here, you must believe eternal security is a lie from the devil. For what you sow is what you shall receive. Heretofore, I recommend, knowing that we must give account for every deed and thought, fix your mind on what is true and give your best to what you ought, and he will make a way for you. Now, here is today's assignment. Meditate on today's lesson. And if you have any questions, please submit them using the form at pinnacleofholiness.com. And I will respond to you as soon as I can. Now, here is what's next. We completed today's podcast, End Times 539, The Impact of Ignorance and Deception, Part 9. And the next podcast is entitled The Torah of Moshe v. The Torah of Yahushua Messiah, Part 2. I will post this podcast on Friday, November 28th, 2025. Until then, my friends, continue to be led by the Spirit of Elohim, continue to watch, continue to pray, continue in fasting, and most of all, continue to be focused, for the end is coming. The end is near.